Hey, what's up, everybody? Today we're looking at Entangled Life: How Fungi Make Our Worlds, Change Our Minds, and Shape Our Futures by Merlin Sheldrake. Merlin Sheldrake is a biologist slash mycologist, which is a person who studies mushrooms, and he's an author, and I believe Entangled Life is his first book. This came out in 2020, and it seems to be pretty universally loved. Fungi is a topic I've always been interested in. This is an entire kingdom of life. There's a million books out there on animals and plants, and not so many on the other kingdoms. But recently, fungi has, for a multitude of reasons, enjoyed much more appreciation among scientists and the population in general, and rightly so. We have a list of mycologists, ecologists, and public figures to thank for this, and most recently added to that list is Merlin Sheldrake. This book was actually pretty similar to a book I read a few years ago called Fantastic Fungi, edited and partially written by Paul Stamets, who, ever since the untimely passing of Terence McKenna, is the mushroom guy. But actually, I'll say that Entangled Life could even be thought of as a better version of Fantastic Fungi. And that's certainly not a slight against Fantastic Fungi. It's just that it's a different kind of book. Fantastic Fungi is shorter and it has a very high production value and it's full of quality, glossy photographs. But Entangled Life isn't that kind of book. But it's clear that Merlin Sheldrake was highly influenced by Paul Stamets, and I'd even go as far as to say that he may have been directly inspired by Paul to write Entangled Life. Sheldrake is basically sharing the reasons he and so many other people are so fascinated by fungi. This involves reasons ranging from ecological awareness to consciousness expanding powers of certain kinds of fungi. I'm not going to spend any more time talking about that because if you know, then you know. And if you don't, it's not something that words can do justice for. But I will mention this. I used to enjoy looking for good books on mushrooms, but I kind of stopped reading them because I was finding that they tended to contain too much speculation and not enough science. Entangled Life is not one of those books at all. This is a science book with bits of first person narrative, and it manages to pull this off while containing a section on psychedelic mushrooms and remaining interesting. Each chapter covers a different aspect of mycology. While the array of chapters might feel a little unorganized, there's definitely a central theme to this book, and that is symbiosis. Sheldrake points to facts which cause us to question the way we look at or think about life and how different life lives and operates together. If you look at a specific fungi, it shares an intimate relationship with the kingdom Plantae, growing around the roots of trees, and at the same time harbors bacteria, as well as having all kinds of different relationships with kingdom Animalia, including enlisting insects to help spread their spores, whether by a friendly relationship or a parasitic one. Then we can look at another kind of fungi and see interdependent symbiosis with the kingdom Protista in lichens, again providing a home for bacteria. We've all seen lichens, right? Turns out they're a lot more interesting and important than we may have thought. Even more fascinating is when we look at some of the features of our bodies or plant bodies, for example. Have you ever wondered how mitochondria or chloroplasts came to be? It was the coming together of simpler bacteria, which came to depend on each other and ended up as a vital component within larger living entities. This kind of thing is talked about in different biology centered books, but here it's an illustration of the intimate relationships that form in nature. And the fact is, we don't really see living organisms that aren't involved in some kind of symbiosis. I mean, besides what we now call mitochondria, and humans are covered in bacteria on the outside as well as on the inside. There are also theories of different biological structures coming to be by similar means, not just mitochondria or chloroplasts. We also talk about fungi's commercial importance. Yeast has to be the most commercially important fungi in history, and this is coming from a guy who doesn't even drink alcohol. But then we can look to modern times and we see new companies utilizing mycofabrication to create all kinds of new products out of fungal mycelium, things like clothing, packing materials, and even building materials. And there's mycoremediation, in which mycologists can exploit fungal powers of decomposition to break down toxic pollution or other materials. There's even fungi that can break down glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in the herbicide Roundup. And the book has some really cool pages of color plates, including one of an oyster mushroom growing out of a cup of used cigarette butts. How crazy is that? I think I was most fascinated by the sections of the book that cover how fungal mycorrhizae form quote unquote agreements with tree and plant roots to move phosphorus and carbon around, helping each other to thrive. Entangled Life had that excellent Eddie Yang feel and quality of nature writing. Maybe I'm just thinking that because there's an Ed Yong blurb on the front of this book, but when your book cover features a compliment by Ed Yong, you did something right. And speaking of the cover, is that not just one of the coolest covers for a nature book that you've ever seen? Kudos to Lucas Heinrich for designing that cover. Okay, that's it for this one, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I really enjoyed this book, and I learned a lot from it. If you're a fan of any kind of biology, I really think that this is one of those books that a wide array of readers will appreciate, because the important topics that make this book so interesting apply to living things, one of which you are. This book even got me seriously considering the idea of learning to grow gourmet mushrooms for profit. But fungi is really fascinating kingdom to read about, and out of the half dozen or so books on mushrooms that I've read, I'd recommend this one at the top of that list. If this is a subject you're interested in, this would be a great book to start with. Definitely check out Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake.